In this video, I will show you how and where to oil and grease your Singer 301. I'm Jen with Sewing Machine Rehab, and I show you how to restore, repair, and maintain your vintage sewing machines. This video is actually part of a larger series. It's called Full Singer 301 Restoration, and you can find a link to the playlist in the description box below. If you took time to like this video, thank you very much. If you haven't yet, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel now. That way you'll know when each new video comes out. Now, let's go ahead and get started on oiling and greasing our Singer 301s. Okay, so let's go over the things that we will need before we properly grease and oil the sewing machine up again. We've cleaned everything off. We have to add new grease and oil back just so everything functions properly. You need some sort of sewing machine grease. I do recommend the Sew Retro grease for a couple of reasons. The applicator is really great for getting into hard to reach places, as well as this motor and gear lubricant, or grease as we commonly call it, has actually been tested for high-speed electrical machinery. That literally means that for the type of heat that these gears will generate, this grease is appropriate. So we will grease the gears in the top of the machine, and then we will oil all the points that we need to oil from the top. Then we'll go to the nose, and then we'll finish up in the bottom. So when you use grease, it's handy to have a little paintbrush around. That's because I can put this grease right on the gears, but this little paintbrush helps me get it spread exactly where I want it to go. Now, if you're following this series, we already greased this worm gear and then the hand wheel gear, which I'm not sure if you can see it. It's right down in here. We greased those before we put them back in the machine. So we're not going to do anything to that today. If you're doing this and you're just trying to grease a machine that you're using, I would just recommend going in around the gears where that extra grease tends to fling off. And you can see this is just from me testing out the motor. Some of the grease that I put on that hand wheel gear and worm gear has flung off inside the machine. Just clean up that extra stuff. Also, you'll want to check out right in here, and I want to zoom in a little bit more for you. So if you're just adding grease, run your cotton swabs around the inside parts of the gears where they sit on the shaft, and then down on this gear here, and clean up any extra old globs of grease. Also, along the edges of the machine, you can clean up the grease. If you want, just so you can reach things better, you can remove this little clip for the wiring, and now you can get to the gears so much easier. To put the grease on, all you have to do is you can either put it onto your brush and then paint it on, or you can do it like this, and I just put some on the gears and then work it in with the brush. As I rotate the gears, I get the points that I can see. Spread the grease around. Turn the hand wheel towards me so another part of the gear is exposed. Add more grease. And this is the same thing we're going to do in the bottom of the machine. Just like that. Probably just a couple more spins and this part will be done. And this is kind of generous What I like to do is after I get the grease worked into the teeth of the gears, I rotate the hand wheel a couple times to see what extra has kind of squished out. Get that with my brush, work it back in. See how there's a bunch of extra grease? This is probably a little bit on the heavy side. So I'll come back in and scoop that off. Because the minute I turn this machine on, the grease is going to just fling everywhere. So that looks pretty good. I'm cautious with using a cotton swab at this particular point because I don't want the fuzz from the cotton swab sticking all over my greasy gears. But that's it. I've greased the gears. Now, you have heard, do not put oil on your gears, and that's exactly right. Don't put oil on your gears, only grease. So where else do we oil in the top of the machine? This is not a hole for oil. If you dropped oil in this hole, which is actually where the top cover screws on, all you would be doing is dripping oil down onto the counterbalance and the hand wheel. You don't need to put oil there. Find a way to dispense your oil without getting it everywhere. A little container like this will work. I also like little eyedropper bottles that I can put my oil in. And then you're going to want to drop some oil in here. And since you're re-oiling up your machine, don't be afraid to do 2 or 3 drops. Drop some oil right here. And then drop some oil right into this little port here. When you do that, give it a couple spins. Now we need to move further down. So I have the machine kind of tilted because you're going to want to drop oil here, not here. It's not going to really do anything for you. You're going to want to drop it here, not here. That also is just going to drip down onto the counterbalance. It's not going to do anything. So a couple drops here and a drop here. So 1, 2, and then 1 right in that hole. And turn your hand wheel. Already I can tell a difference. This turns smoothly, but there's just something buttery about it now. So now let's add what we need inside the nose. So you will need to turn your hand wheel some to get the points that you want to oil turned in the right direction. This little point right here, a lot of times I just kind of add the oil in with the brush, but you can also squeeze it in with the dropper. There's also a point, and you have to turn your hand wheel to see it, but right here is a little hole. You want to add oil there. Keep turning your hand wheel, and you will see a little point that shows up right here. Add a drop of oil there, and then just give it a spin. Down here is another hole that you can add some oil and give it a spin. So all these places where we have moving parts, that's where we're adding oil. Now, there is one more spot right here. You want to add a drop of oil. Now, Your needle bar and your presser bar are moving up and down in the machine. So let's add a little oil. And you can just put a drop right along here and here. If you add too much though, that's going to flow down onto your foot. And you can raise and lower your presser bar to work that oil in. So I think we've covered pretty much all the parts in the nose. So now let's move to the ports along the bed of the machine. There are several places you can add oil here. On the needle plate, put a drop or two of oil in that hole. Do not add oil here. These are where an attachment can screw down. Add it in the hole behind it. Then you'll notice over here is a hole. Add a drop of oil there. The last two are on the neck of the machine, and I actually like to tilt the machine back to add these last 2 drops of oil. And that is, put a drop or 2 in this hole. And if it starts to run down the machine, just wipe it off with a cloth. And in that hole. Then maybe hold it there for a moment, let that oil work its way down in. If I get like a little air bubble, you can normally just pop it with a pin, and that oil will continue to work its way down into place. Don't forget that you have a port here for oil. I'm not going to oil this today because I already oiled it when I reassembled it, and it takes such a little amount that if I add more right now, it will bleed out right here on the end and just make a mess. So now we can look at the bottom of the machine. So we'll re-grease these gears first. And it's just like you did the top. Just a little bit of oil here. Sorry, grease. Don't put oil on your gears. Work it in with a brush. And if you were just adding grease, you would clean off any grease that had spattered or that had worked its way right here on the gears. Doesn't do anything once it's there. Turn your hand wheel. More grease. And I have construction going on today at my house. There's a lot of people coming inside and outside and opening and closing of doors and hammering and sawing. And I just didn't want to wait until they were finished to shoot this video. I think I just need one more spin. Then just rotate your hand wheel. Make sure you got it everywhere. And it's good to go. So now we can oil all the different parts that need oil. And here, you're not just looking for little holes. You're actually looking for where metal turns on metal. All those little joints, it doesn't hurt to oil them. So you're going to oil here, there's a hole. Here, where this little pivot point is. Along this crack right here, it will get down to this pivot point. You can put a drop here. You can put a drop here. You can put a drop here and here on this little part. Here. Any place where the metal is spinning or moving when you turn your hand wheel. And then just give it a few good turns. And that pretty much covers it. We've oiled all of the moving parts. We've greased the gears. Now we can get back to the final parts of reassembling the sewing machine and doing our test sewing. So when we come back, we're going to take a little bit of time to focus on the top cover and the nose cover. There are a few little parts to put back together on those. We will not put on our bed extension until the very end, because as you are first doing your beginning test sewing, it's just easier to access the hook and feed dogs without it being on. We also still need to talk about what to do if you removed the felt from the bottom cover for the machine. And I want to show you what I do to replace that felt. So I hope you have some scrap fabric handy, some needles and thread, because you are almost done. Thank you so much for watching. If you have questions, just leave them down below in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you again really soon. Bye.